Welcome to the Lewis and Clark State Historic Site. My name's Ben and I work here as a site interpreter. Today I want to feature something that we have on display in our museum, something that Lewis and Clark would have carried something very similar to this on their journey, and that is the tin signal horn or the tin trumpet. It's a very simple tool that they brought with them that served a very important function on their journey. So when we think of Lewis and Clark traveling west, they are exploring uncharted territory. There's literally no map. They're making it along the way. We often think about them getting lost and the navigation skills required. Maybe they're hiring guides or backtracking at times because they want to make sure that their journey is on the right path. What we don't always think of, though, is the soldiers that get sent out on their own tasks. Hunters, scouts, people being sent back downriver to get supplies that were lost or forgotten. And so these soldiers could also get lost. And oftentimes, they'd only be maybe a few miles from the main party, but that was still pretty treacherous because they're on unfamiliar territory. There's wild animals. The weather could get really nasty. And they usually, if they went out hunting or scouting, only brought some of the tools and hunting gear that they needed. They didn't really have anything that they would need for a long time staying on their own and surviving. So it's very important for these soldiers to get back to the expedition. And that's a little trickier than it sounds at times because as Lewis and Clark are traveling upriver, they are pulling very large keelboats and pirogues with them. And sometimes if you hit a sandbar and you have to unload weight, move around it, or if you're making very good time, you're not going to end up where these hunters are expecting you to end up. You were planning to maybe make 4 miles upriver that day, but you only get a quarter mile. Those hunters are going to work up ahead of the river, hoping to intercept you later on, and they're going to be way off, which means they're going to have to spend the night on the bank waiting for you to show up, and they may assume that you've actually passed them. And so they'll travel further upriver away from the party. So Captain Lewis realized this could be a problem, and while he's in Philadelphia, he purchased a number of these tin trumpets or signal horns. They were about 50 cents a piece, kind of a common good, very similar to what the boatmen working on the different rivers and canals further east would have used to signal on the water. And these will come in handy on getting soldiers back to the party after being lost for sometimes days. We have an example of George Shannon getting lost for over 16 days. He's low on ammunition. He's not a very good hunter. It seems because he nearly starved to death on this journey. He does finally catch up with the party. Another example taking place in the Illinois country as they're making their way to the St. Louis area in 1803 is that of Nathaniel Pryor. He was going hunting on his own while the rest of the party was working up the Mississippi. And I'll let Captain Lewis take up from there, starting in the 22nd of November, 1803. One of my men, Nathaniel Pryor, who went out to hunt this morning, has not yet come up, had several guns fired to bring him to, and the horn frequently blown, but without effect. The next day he writes, in Pryor, the man who was hunting yesterday has not yet arrived. Had several guns fired again, and the horn blown. Waited until half after 7 o'clock, and then set out without him. So at this point, Nathaniel Pryor has been lost for 2 days. They still have not seen of him, and they still need to continue to head upriver and hope that Pryor will catch up. All this while, they're using their muskets, like this one right here, and the signal horn to make themselves known. I have no doubt they're also screaming for Pryor along the way. So, Pryor! Pryor! But to no avail. So on this third day, November 24th of 1803, set out this morning at 7 o'clock. As we were bearing off, Pryor, the man who had been absent and lost for the last 2 days, hailed. We passed the river and took him in. He was much fatigued with his wandering and somewhat indisposed. So pretty rough for wear on his expedition that took a little too long. In this case, Pryor was actually too far upriver. He actually kind of overestimated how far they were going to travel. But he was able to find his way back And that's usually what we see in the journals, is these guys are not lost for very long. And what you'll see on Discovering Lewis and Clark, the website run by the Lewis and Clark Trail Heritage Foundation, on their section on the signal horn, which I'll include a link to, they say that the signal horn is not mentioned all that often in the journals. And that doesn't mean it's not getting used a lot. This would have been a very common item. These guys were going out every day. They're signaling to bring them in at night. So actually, the times where we do hear about the horn being used is usually the exception. The soldiers are lost and not responding to it. So probably getting used a whole lot, but so commonly that they're not getting noticed unless the soldiers are really, really lost. So let's talk about the tin horn itself. Often it would have these little hooks so you can carry it with you, suspend it on your shoulder or something like that. It's very simple tin and solder. So you could get this from just about any metal worker. This is a very simple thing to make. But what's unique about it is that it is very similar to something that you'd maybe be a little more familiar with. And that's a little toy party horn. These little plastic party horns that you've seen at children's birthdays and other celebrations. They don't sound as cool, but they're using the exact same technology. Inside of this tin horn, there is a small reed that will flap back and forth as you blow into it. Really just how hard you blow and really how much you can tense up your lips will kind of change the tone a little bit. Same thing with the party horn. It is just a very simple plastic flap that you have to do most of the work with your mouth to really make any change. Pretty tough. This is much easier to use, and of course it could be heard a lot further away. Well, thanks for taking a look at just one of the many items from the Lewis and Clark expedition. You can check out more of our videos on our YouTube page and on our Facebook page. You can check out more about us at the Lewis and Clark State Historic site at campdubois.com. Thanks for watching.